The silence on the Palghar Sadhu incident was deafening. There's so many issues. The Chalisa aspect, deafening. Kangana Ranaut, staunchly Hindutva and talking. Again, the treatment given to her was less of Shiv Sena response, more of NCP Congress pressure, is what many people say. Savarkar, Savarkar being bashed and silence and still saying we are strong. Forget that. Bala Sahib used to proudly say that the first stick over the structure at Ayodhya on Ram Janmabhoomi was done by Karseva, was done by Shiv Senics. He said, I'm willing to go to jail for it. And here there are MLAs and there are others saying, you are not allowing us to go to Ayodhya. For Bhumi Pujan, you said Shiv Senics will not go. This is a huge shift, ideological shift on ground. And this has been a constant issue with the Shiv Sena. Clearly, the Shiv Senics got marginalized. Their MLAs were not getting their funds. So this is not something which has happened overnight.
Yeah.
It's not that Eknath Shinde suddenly decided, oh, I just want to go. It's been brewing.
Yeah.
38 MLAs are now sitting with Eknath Shinde. If 38 MLAs are sitting with Eknath Shinde, that means it's a big problem. And what are they saying? They are saying, get out of this alliance.
Yeah.
Keep the Shiv Sena alive, get out of this alliance. That India has been setting. We are the fastest growing economy. We have got the fastest numbers of improvement at all the SDGs. We are opening up. We have broken down 1,500 different laws. We are climbing up on the ease of business. We are trying to create a single market window, and we are a vibrant democracy with a fantastic demographic dividend and abundant resources. So we've got all the positives going. So how do I kill this positive narrative? I create disruption. I create misinformation. I get this demographic dividend out on the streets and burn and break and create public disorder. Then I string this narrative abroad, put it on front pages as op-eds and say, listen, India is burning. So Piyush Goyal's press conference happened at 5 a.m. with us.
Wow.
5 a.m. Geneva. In fact, at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. inside the WTO, the minister came to the media center for a informal briefing, and you had nearly 40, 50 foreign journalists saying, what is the India minister saying? Because India is driving consensus. So what is the India minister saying and what is the possibility? So at about 1 a.m. in the morning, 12 midnight, 1 a.m., they thought that consensus has been arrived. Then there was crisis again. Then they said, oh, let's go back in. And eventually, we had 5 outcomes. So that perhaps encapsulates the shift that we are seeing, that India as being seen as an enabler and not as a stone pelter at the WTO anymore.
Namaste and welcome to Citti Media. I am your host Kamal Madi Shetty. This is the Current Affairs show where we break down some of the most important developments in India and that concern India. Now, a lot has been happening in India these days, from what's happening in the political landscape of Maharashtra to the protests that we saw in recent days against the Agnipath scheme to India's showing at the WTO Ministerial Conference. And to discuss all this, we have a very special guest who has been analyzing all of this very closely. We have the managing editor of special projects and senior anchor at Network 18, Anand Narasimhan. Namaste, Anandji. Welcome to
Namaste.
Citti.
Namaste, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Anandji, for joining us. Now, I want to begin straight away with what's happening in Maharashtra, Anandji. Now, there's been major developments where the Uddhav Thackeray government is on the verge of collapse after his party's MLAs, led by Eknath Shinde, have revolted. Now, before I go into where this is headed and all of the other predictions, first of all, I wanted to know from you what led to the current situation.
Well, namaste again, and thank you for having me here. If we see the Maharashtra situation, the story is around the Shiv Sena. There are two groups. Both are real Shiv Senics. Frankly, Eknath Shinde, and with no prejudice or disrespect to Mr. Uddhav Thackeray, Eknath Shinde is far more a Shiv Senik than Mr. Uddhav Thackeray. No disrespect, but on fact, the reason being, Mr. Uddhav Thackeray was never interested in politics. He's a gentleman. He's very, very well read, very, very nice human being to interact with. And politics was never his first choice. He has photography as a hobby. He wanted to do some other things in life, but it was situations which forced the hand, and Uddhavji had to get into the mainstream to take on the entire Thackerays being part of Shiv Sena and to carry on the legacy of Balasaheb. That's how it started. So let's understand the historical perspective. Because had Binda Thackray been there, uh, it would have been a different story altogether. So that tragedy that happened in Worli Seaface and the accident and his death, and it all started a different chapter itself for Uddhavji. The other thing is that in 1992, there was a Chhagan Bhujbal who questioned the leadership of Balasaheb and broke away. He took with him 18 MLAs. The Shiva Sena at that time was reduced to about 34 MLAs from about 52 odd. So that aspect we should not forget, that this is not something this has happened before. The crisis of breaking away has happened in the past, but the scale at which is happening and the timing, and because of the decisions, you had Chhagan Bhujbal joining Congress, and then now eventually he's again moved parties. But the story is that Shiv Sena has faced crisis in the past. At that time, Balasaheb had written an article in the Samna where he had said that if anybody in the party is upset with me as a leader and thinks that I don't deserve to lead the party, I am willing to step down. At that time, 18 MLAs didn't make the bulk, and the Shiva Sainiks rallied around Balasaheb. There is one aspect which you cannot, Balasaheb may have made decisions and compromises, etc., etc. But one aspect he was very sthir, that the ideological axis of the Shiva Sena was always Hindutva. And to a big extent or to a large extent, it was militant Hindutva in the sense that they wore it on their sleeve and they were unabashed about it. So there was for a long time the liberal lobby painting the Shiva Sena as a very crude party, which did not, to a certain level, some of them calling them uncouth, a bunch of rogues, etc. But for the common person on ground, the armed Shiva Sainik, that pride was very important. That pride is the one that ensured that they continue to hold sway in Mumbai and a large part of Maharashtra, despite the BJP being strong. And they were actually the best, perfect regional foil for the BJP.
Right.
The trouble started when the Shiva Sena started feeling under Uddhav Thackeray that their existence was under threat because the BJP was going to cannibalize.
Right.
The logical argument is that you would want to look at survival. So that's why he broke but they won 55 seats not because of themselves. They won 55 seats because of the BJP in the elections. They should not forget that it was the BJP's groundswell, the might and muscle, and of course the public sentiment and support for Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Devendra Fadnavis as a 5-year completion of a term, which gave them that kind of momentum. And the BJP actually gained. The Shiva Sena was on the wane for lack of leadership or whatever many other reasons. But there is a reason why my answer is a little long, because I'm just trying to give a particular perspective to this entire aspect. Last 2.5 years, along with COVID, there has been a big attrition in the respect level and the clout of the average Shiv Sainik on ground.
Right.
It has been usurped by the NCP and the Congress. Mr. Uddhav Thackeray said, you made a promise to me and you are reneging on that promise, so I'm going to break away. That was his thought process, and he has maintained it all along. But at what cost? At the cost of the NCP, Mr. Sharad Pawar, and the Congress then deciding the narrative, them dictating terms. They insisted that Uddhavji has himself said it, they insisted that if Uddhav Thackeray does not become chief minister, there will be no alliance. They pushed him to a corner. He had to break a tradition where Balasaheb said that I will always be the kingmaker, or I will always be outside. I will never contest elections, or Thackeray will never contest elections, and Thackeray will never become chief minister. Uddhavji became chief minister. Aditya Thackeray ended up contesting elections. So breaking of tradition happened.
Yeah.
But larger than breaking of tradition was the ideological compromise that they had to make on militant Hindutva. The silence on the Palghar Sadhu incident was deafening. There's so many issues. The Chalisa aspect, deafening. Kangana Ranaut, staunchly Hindutva and talking. Again, the treatment given to her was less of Shiv Sena response, more of NCP Congress pressure, is what many people say. Savarkar, Savarkar being bashed and silence and still saying we're stopped. Forget that. Bala Sahib used to proudly say that the first stick over the structure at Ayodhya on Ram Janmabhoomi was done by Karseva, was done by Shiv Senics. He said, I'm willing to go to jail for it. And here there are MLAs and there are others saying, you are not allowing us to go to Ayodhya. For Bhumi Pujan, you said Shiv Senics will not go. This is a huge shift, ideological shift on ground. And this has been a constant issue with the Shiv Sena. Plus, along with COVID, Uddhavji also for about 18 to 19 months did not come to Mantralaya because of ill health, COVID scare, and he went through a very critical surgery and a period where for 6 to 7 months he was incapacitated. So there was somebody else running government, and it was not the Shiv Sena. It was the NCP which took over the reins. Clearly, the Shiv Senics got marginalized. Their MLAs were not getting their funds. So this is not something which has happened overnight.
Yeah.
It's not that Eknath Shinde suddenly decided, oh, I just want to go. It's been brewing. Yeah. 38 MLAs are now sitting with Eknath Shinde. If 38 MLAs are sitting with Eknath Shinde, that means it's a big problem. And what are they saying? They are saying, get out of this alliance. Yeah. Keep the Shiv Sena alive, get out of this alliance. My point is, nobody is saying ally with the BJP. You just say, I don't want a government. I want my party. Let's go back to elections if you want elections. Let's see how the Shiv Sena does. We'll fight the BJP. It started with Eknath Shinde insisting that the Shiv Sena should fight the BMC elections alone. Right. Don't fight it with the NCP and the Congress, because the NCP and Congress will cannibalize you. Shiv Senics will vote for NCP Congress, but the Congress and NCP cadre will never canvass for the Shiv Senics, and we will lose. And the sentiment will go, and it will be the BJP that will gain and the NCP Congress will gain. We will lose. And we saw that manifest with the Rajya Sabha elections and with the the Parishad elections, Vidhan Parishad, MLCs. So those factors are the ones that we are seeing manifest right now. Now here, both sides would want to gain and lose. So in terms of which side wants to gain and lose. For the BJP, clearly, it's a chance. With Eknath Shinde having the clear numbers and nearly 50 plus MLAs, including independents, BJP is comfortable. They can approach Eknath Shinde. He can create a breakaway faction. Anti-defection clause won't come in. Whatever happens, they can form government. But for the NCP, what do they want? They thought Eknath Shinde, from their point of view, will break away like Chhagan Bhujbal with 12-15 MLAs. What happens then? They have 169 in the Vidhan Sabha right now. Halfway mark is 145. 12-15 MLAs break away, they still have a 10 MLA cap. 29 seats is their cushion that they have. 12-15 go away, they still have 10-15 MLA gap. But who becomes the single largest party?
Yeah,
NCP does. So they thought this will not, it will be a breakaway, it will happen. BJP will gain a little, but we'll still form government, but I will hold control. Yeah. That's not happened right now. So you see the power tussle, layers within layers. But for me, the story is Shiv Sena. Yeah. If Mr. Uddhav Thackeray says Thackeray is equal to Shiv Sena and Shiv Sena is equal to Thackeray's, then he should have been in Guwahati talking with Eknath Shinde and saying, let's do one thing. Let's get out of this Agadi, but we will not join BJP. Let's go and fight alone for the sake of the Shiv Sena. That's not happened yet.
Yes.
So is he choosing the kursi of the chief minister and the Agadi over the Shiv Sena, the party? That's a question he has to answer. He may have his point of view, but I'm saying from the outside, this is how it looks to me.
Absolutely, Anandji. That is very insightful. And I think you make a very important point that it's not a one-day affair. This has been brewing for a long time, and it's hard to imagine why, Uddhav Thackeray did not see this coming, in fact, because I think there have been numbers, and I was looking at some numbers, and there have been 48 constituencies where Shiv Sena and NCP have historically, not from yesterday, but from 1999, have been neck to neck, and they're bitter rivals. And those MLAs feel cheated. Those MLAs feel, that the ground under their feet is shrinking. And there are 21 of them who are Shiv Sena MLAs, and then the rest, the NCP. But even in terms of, you mentioned the portfolios and resources, I think there's also a lot of complaints about the resources being controlled by the NCP ministers and cadres. So now coming to what's happening right now, Anandji, there was an executive meeting that was held at Uddhav Thackeray's house, and there were he was sort of there was a lot of people who pledged their allegiance to him, although the numbers were missing, right? And also there was a notice that was sent by the deputy speaker to some of the MLAs in the Eknath Shinde camp, and there has also been a street power exercise of street power, where some MLAs houses have reportedly been attacked, and Sanjay Raut has also given many threats, etc. And in response, the Eknath Shinde camp has challenged these notices. They've claimed, where are your numbers? If you say that you are the real Shiv Sena, where are your numbers? So where do you see this going? And what are the different options that both sides have going forward?
Well, how things will unfold, nobody can control. But right now, Eknath Shinde has the numbers.
Right.
Eknath Shinde has got the ability to even question the deputy speaker's decision if he disqualifies only a select group of MLAs. The deputy speaker has asked for an explanation and given time for the Shinde camp to respond to it. Point is, the story is Shiv Sena. And it is for Mr. Uddhav Thackeray to now decide. Does he want a split, and that too just with 12, 15 MLAs on his side? And does he want to see Shiv Senics going after Shiv Senics? Because that's going to further help the NCP and the Congress.
Yeah.
He thought that the BJP is going to cannibalize him. But look what has happened. Those two parties which were relegated to almost a nadir, and they had no position, even with the Lok Sabha elections, they are now trying to gather steam and gain currency. Look what is happening. You may have ideological, you may have political issues, or tussles, leadership tussles with your ideological twin. But when you go into an unnatural alliance, you will never gain unless you have solid ground, unless you have asserted yourself at all points in time. Given COVID, given Uddhavji's ill health, his being incapacitated, Aditya Thackeray's inexperience, the NCP, and it is Mr. Sharad Pawar who's calling the shots.
Yeah.
So when you are saying, you imagine how would you feel when an Uddhav Thackeray in his first emotional appeal says, I got support from Sharad Pawar, I got support from Sonia Gandhi. It is my own MLAs who are upset with me. I don't need to say anything more than that. The very same Sharad Pawar and Sonia Gandhi who Bala Sahib had very clearly, outrightly dismissed. You know what he thought of the Congress party. Yes, Mr. Pawar and Uddhav Thackeray, Bala Sahib were friends, but that is different. Politically, they were always opponents. They would never come together like this the way they have. Even whatever opportunism. My point is, if you have no party, what is your existence? आपका अस्तित्व ही खत्म हो गया ना. That Thackeray equal to Shiv Sena equal to Thackeray, touch your heart and tell me you feel that's a thing? Or would you rather go ahead with somebody who's going to bring back pride? Well, for a party karyakarta, it is pride. That he can strut about with the party symbol, and when he walks and then there is a Hurry Shiv Sainik. Right. That is what matters to them. सरकार है नहीं, ये फर्क नहीं पड़ता. पार्टी का वो ओहदा होना चाहिए, वो रुतबा होना चाहिए ना. That's gone. Yes. You've got to restore that. So how this plays out is purely in the hands of Mr. Uddhav Thackeray right now. Right. It's nobody else to decide. Right. It's very simple for him to do. He doesn't need to sit on an ego on a high horse. He doesn't need to. He needs to see what the party is going to do. And of course, he has to secure Aditya Thackeray's future also. Right now, his position as Supremo of Shiv Sena is under question. He's being surrounded by a coterie who are spending more time in the unnatural alliance and in the camps of the NCP and the Congress rather than with the Shiv Senics. So there is a issue there on ground, right? And it is for him to rectify. It's very easy for him to do it because Eknath, what is Eknath Shinde saying? Saying, I am a Shiv Sainik myself. I don't want to break away. I want you to break out
Yeah.
of the Agadi. Nobody is saying ally with the BJP to continue to remain in power. You say, okay, I'm not allying with anybody. Let the governor dissolve the
Yeah.
assembly. What will happen? You will go into early elections. You fight the elections on your own. See where you stand, and then thereafter decide: do you want to go with your ideological, equal and your ideological twin, and work as a second field? With 55 parties, you can't claim that I am bigger than you.
Yeah.
The BJP had clearly twice the number with 106. So BJP will be big brother. But at least to come back to your ideological footprint, no, your ideological axis, where imagine had it been Balasaheb, you think somebody on Shivaji's Janbhumi, Karmbhumi, and this one would have dared to go ahead and put a chadar on Aurangzeb's tomb
Yes.
and scoffed about it and mocked it.
Yes.
They wouldn't have dared to set foot in Aurangabad. Forget Aurangabad, Mumbai नहीं आते थे.
Right.
That see, वो
Yeah.
वो रुतबा वो गरूर जो है ना वो नहीं है ना, वो नहीं है तो फिर क्या फायदा बताइए.
Absolutely, absolutely, Anandji. I think it's going to be very interesting to see which way Mr. Uddhav Thackeray will choose to go. But one hopes that there's no street violence which is being threatened at the moment, and this is resolved in the way it should be.
You see, Sarkar unki
Right.
cops, they have to manage law and order, and it is their own party cadre who are going to create lawlessness.
Yes.
What logic is this?
Yes.
They're further going to lose ground.
Yeah.
It is like you're trying to dance in quicksand, so you'll
Yeah.
sink faster, no?
Absolutely, absolutely, Anandji. Anandji, that actually takes me to my second set of questions that I had for you, which is about protests. Now, in recent days, we've seen a wave of protests against the new Agnipath scheme, which again worryingly turned violent. Can you tell us about what led to these protests, and I mean, what do they aim to achieve? Because if we look back at the last two or 3 years, this has been a trend where there have been protests against a number of issues. Now, there's nothing wrong with protests, but what is wrong and worrisome is the way they have been turning violent. Now, this happened with the anti-CA protest. This happened with the protest against the agricultural reforms, and it has happened with a whole number of other things. So, what is driving such violent street protests in India?
Okay, let's break it down.
Yeah.
First, inability of the government and the system to communicate simply and effectively fast. Secondly, ability of the vested interest to miscommunicate and misinform faster. And thirdly, a vendetta group which wants to see India derailed, which wants to show India to the world as a nation that is unstable, a nation that is not secure or safe, and a nation where you cannot come down and invest and set up at a time when India is pushing the growth story, and it is pushing the story that we are the more stable, secure, vibrant, viable alternative to an autocratic institution or establishment like China, which whose intent is to cannibalize, use anything and everything under its comprehensive national power strategy, where it wants to dominate and eventually cannibalize you. So either enslave you economically or militarily or culturally. That's their objective. Our objective is to work and to show that India is a base where it's not just a market for you, but you can also market to the world from here. That's the story that India has been setting. We are the fastest growing economy. We have got the fastest numbers of improvement at all the SDGs. We are opening up. We have broken down 1,500 different laws. We are climbing up on the ease of business. We are trying to create a single market window, and we are a vibrant democracy with a fantastic demographic dividend and abundant resources. So we've got all the positives going. So how do I kill this positive narrative? I create disruption. I create misinformation. I get this demographic dividend out on the streets and burn and break and create public disorder. Then I string this narrative abroad, put it on front pages as op-eds, and say, listen, India is burning. So this is plain and simple. If you and me can understand this and appreciate this, clearly the government also understands this and appreciates this. The speed with which they moved to try and counter and quell the protests around Agnipath, had they done that with CAA and with farmer protests, it wouldn't have happened. They allowed situations to brew, giving the point that they want to create an atmosphere where they are not going to quell protests. They are going to say everybody has equal rights. Everybody has the right to this one, and we will continue to say our piece. Let them say their piece. So they were not brutal in cracking it down, but they were slow in trying to break misinformation. तो जब तक सच कुर्सी से खड़ा हुआ तब तक झूठ पूरा शहर घूम के आ चुका था.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So that's exactly what's happening here. Reforms are the need of the hour.
Yes.
The world wants India to push the pace of reforms for it to come and invest here. We are trying to push the reforms, and there will be others who want to block this reform. See, interestingly, now we'll come to WTO in just a bit, but those nations who are backing the farmer protests, where the farmers were using MSP as a reason to try and quell the farm laws, although those two are separate issues, is the same group of nations called the Keynes Group and some of the others who are blocking India giving MSP at the WTO. There they are saying don't give food stock safety and public stock safety.
Yeah.
And here they are backing the protest, which is demanding the same.
Yeah.
So you see the double game they're playing.
Absolutely.
So you and me can see it, but the government has to communicate that to the common person.
Right.
Absolutely. That they have
Absolutely.
to communicate better.
Absolutely, Anandji. I think, like you said, the picture that is painted about India is so contradictory and so disconnected to the actual realities on the ground. And, as citizens, I think we have to go through all this, and we have to tolerate all these violent protests and also destruction of public property, which we have seen in recent days. And all in the name of freedom to protest against the government, but violence is not some part of that package. Yet there are, like you said, a lot of colonial minded people sitting in the West, and also a lot of elites in India who continue to push this narrative that there's no room for dissent in India, that India is under a fascist government. How do you respond to such characterizations of India?
We need to respond as a nation. We need to write more. We need to get into these and expose these media platforms which will not allow a counter narrative or the real picture. They will block articles by people who want to contribute and put the real picture with statistics and numbers, or they will put them in the latter pages with smaller column space, but they will put those who are the anti-India lobbies. So they have their own agenda to. So, but we need to do. I keep saying the same thing. I said we are 1.4 billion people with 2 billion phones, right? We've got the biggest traffic on any social media platform across the world. We contribute to majority of the traffic.
Yeah.
If every single person, all of us, every day on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Koo, Signal, wherever, whichever platform that we're using, if we start putting, not even every day, 2 pictures or 2 instances in a week where we tell you this is why you need to come to India.
Yeah.
Imagine how much of India, positive India information, good India information, better India information would be spread across the world.
Right.
Everybody will see only good about India.
Right.
So, but we are not doing it.
Yeah.
Why should we expect the government to do it? Why can't we do it?
Right.
So if I put out and say, okay, this is the early morning garam chai that you have.
Yeah.
No amount of latte or chai tea is going to give you this
Yeah.
khola hua badhiya cutting chai. Come to India for a cutting chai.
Yes.
To the time when I say, see, this is the Yamuna Expressway.
Right.
Noida to Agra in 1.5 hours or 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. So faster, you get faster to the Taj. Come to India.
Yeah.
Why aren't we putting out this thing? Those who question the entire Aryan concept done. Look at the Rakhi Gadi.
Yeah.
Civilization existed more than 5,000 years ago in India. We are an advanced race. Come and see this in India.
Yeah.
There's so many things which you can put out.
Yes.
Sardar Patel. Facts and factor. Itna to sab kuch hai yaar. You pick out stuff on Pingala and Shastra. How we knew arithmetic and we knew meters, which even the kinds of Max Muller could not understand. There is so much from day to day to everything we can do.
Right.
You can wear a sari 110 ways. Find out when you come to India.
Yeah.
So there are so many things which you can talk. हम लोग नहीं करते ना. Why?
Absolutely.
Because we don't have this concept of that I am India.
Yeah.
The moment you, me, all of us start thinking I am Bharat, let every single person across the world, that the remaining 80% of the world's population, form its impression via every single Indian, and especially that percentage which goes abroad and interacts with the rest of the world. And I will never talk ill about my country to an outsider.
Right.
You
Yes.
and me can have problems.
Yeah.
We'll sort it amongst ourselves. I will not tell the outer world anything negative about my country.
Yeah.
If majority of all of us start doing this,
Right.
imagine what's going to happen.
Yes.
No kind of vicious misinformation campaign is going to work. यहाँ क्या है? We are conditioned to abuse ourselves.
Yes.
We are conditioned to think negatively about ourselves. We are conditioned to think that the West or the world will look at us only if we are critical about ourselves. Why? The percentage of rape in New York per rated per population is far higher than India.
Yes.
Any city in India.
Yes.
But why is India perceived as a country that if you come here you will get raped? But
Yes.
New York is not,
Right.
because they don't abuse their own country outside. They filter it.
Yes.
We don't filter it. We actually abuse our country to the world, but in India we don't. In our New York in the pandemic or America in the pandemic, the absence of police, you saw how much of lawlessness there is. In our country, we in movies also the story is कि घटना घटने के बाद पुलिस आती है. But कितनी घटनाएं घटती है?
Hmm.
Largely aren't people orderly in the absence of police. That's who we are as a civilization.
Yes.
1.4 billion people, and look at the law and order that you have. The absence of it also, even if they are not present, one cop per 700 people. That's our number.
Yes.
But are we a lawless nation?
Hmm.
So then the problem is that we don't believe in ourselves as much, and we don't take ourselves as seriously as we should.
Absolutely, Anandji. I think there is a lack of self confidence, especially among the youth. And I was wondering. Recently we saw the announcement of Draupadi Murmuji as the NDA's candidate for the president's post. A lot of young people who used to celebrate and who celebrated Kamala Harris when she was became vice president probably don't even know about this. And that, I think, tells something that a lot of Indians, especially young Indians, continue to look to the West for validation on a number of things, like you said, our everyday cultural practices, even understanding our own country's politics from a foreign lens. How damaging is this mindset in particular?
So it has damaged us already. Look at this. You and me are having a conversation in English rather than an Indian language.
Right.
So that's how much we have damaged ourselves.
Yes.
We keep our own traditional attire for occasions, for festivals, and all we want to do is wear Western clothing all the time. We ape the West. That's what they want us to do. They are culturally colonizing us, and they have colonized us. What have they left? Angres chale gaye, but they have left brown Angres.
Yes.
I'm putting it very candidly. That's exactly what's happened with us. So yes, it will take time, because
Yes.
this has happened not overnight. It has taken 6-7 decades of independence, plus about 200-300 years of colonization under the British, and before that, at least 600 years of colonization of Bharat has resulted in this brainwash where we started. We've been weaned away from our culture, our traditions, what is our bhasha and our Sanskriti. It will take time.
Yes.
And I don't think this generation or the youth or the current generation lack in self confidence.
Right.
It's just that they lack in the belief that they are Bharat.
Yes.
Each one of them is Bharat. And they lack in the knowledge of the depth, wealth, and the strength of this country.
Right.
And that's where communication is more important. More of strategic communication, more of the orientation of the media. See, it is all a culture which has to change. The
Yes.
culture of self abuse and and self loathing,
Right.
that has to change. It is changing, but
Yes.
ये थोड़ा छोटा थोड़ा स्लो पेनफुल प्रोसेस है, तो धीरे धीरे होगा.
Absolutely, Anandji. You summarized it beautifully. The last question and the topic that I wanted to pick your brains on was, about the WTO Ministerial Conference. Now, you were there in Geneva when the 12th Ministerial Conference took place. Can you share with our viewers, what were India's positions and how successful were we in defending them at the conference?
Uh, okay, this is the first time where India was seen as an enabler. Usually, the the picture that India is painted on, or it's called labeled the disruptor. कि हम लोग जो भी वो करना चाहते हैं, we come and say नहीं होगा नहीं, and we will
Hmm.
not let you do. But this is the first time where India was an enabler. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of hard work that's gone in. I have seen personally the ambassador to the WTO, Brajendra Navneet, and his team, and then the Commerce and Industries Minister, Piyush Goyal, and his team work tirelessly
Yes.
through more than 48 to 72 hours. It's been non-stop for them, and of course in the build-up also. See, this is the first time, and and here is where I'm telling you, it's not seasoned people, but this is young blood, young joint secretaries, bureaucrats, who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to push the narrative and push those nations who wanted to control and be hegemonistic about setting the narrative. They have pushed those nations, and India has championed the cause of developing nations along with nations like China, and also China surprisingly on a lot of issues, and against China in certain issues, because it's a gamut of issues. But the Africa nations have come together. A lot of the Southeast Asian nations have come together. So, South Africa as an Africa nation has really helped. A lot of the LATAM nations have come together. So we've had largely the support out of 164 countries, the support of nearly 112 to 120 countries, and in certain cases, nearly 156 nations on a lot of issues. And what India did is, traditionally they would look at one or two clauses in one or two categories and block that or push for that. But this time we saddled a range of issues. We looked at e-commerce, we looked at fisheries, we looked at food security and public stocks and World Food Program. We looked at TRIPS waiver, and we also looked at WTO response to pandemic. So this is perhaps the first time that you have had five outcomes which have come through, where
Yes.
India has not just talked up the issue of developing nations and India per se, the interest of India per se, but it has also been able to bring these developed nations around on a lot of issues. And this is the first time a WTO meeting is happening in person in 5 years. The next one will happen in 6 months, and a lot of the agendas will be pursued further. And let me tell you, on day one, there were two consensus points which are supposed to reach. And you had the WTO DG, Ngozi, also, who's a Nigerian, and she was very driven. And she's also worked tirelessly on this. So there's a lot of credit that goes to her also, along with some of the EU nations that came through eventually. But on day one, the WTO response and TRIPS waiver was supposed to happen.
Hmm.
That consensus was supposed to be announced, because that would have set the tone for the remaining days
Correct.
and some positive outcomes thereafter. But that got blocked by two nations. Switzerland, who was co-hosting along with Kazakhstan, because it happened in Geneva, and UK. And it
Okay.
was purely because of the big pharma. It was
Right.
purely to protect the interests of big pharma and that law. And that meant that on day two, that happened on Monday evening, there was no consensus that came through. Two nations blocked it and they couldn't arrive on consensus. And WTO principles are consensus, it's not majority. So it works on a principle of consensus. So everybody has to agree. Then day two, they said nothing's happening. So by the end of day two, it looked like it's all dead and buried, and they may just call it, wind it up on Wednesday itself. That was the official date that it was supposed to wind up. But then what happened is, on Tuesday evening, India got 12 other countries, 11 other countries into the green room, and they started thrashing it out clause by clause and trying to emphasize. And Piyush Goyal and Brajendra Navneet actually led these negotiations inside the green room. There was hectic parleys that happened. It went on into the wee hours and actually ended about 5 a.m. in the morning. And that's when you had the WTO DG saying we'll extend it till 3 p.m. in the afternoon. The moment they reached till 3 p.m., Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m., but it didn't stop at 3 p.m. It actually went on till 4 a.m. that day into
Okay.
Friday morning. So Piyush Goyal's press conference happened at 5 a.m. with us,
Wow.
5 a.m. Geneva. In fact, at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. inside the WTO, the minister came to the media center for informal briefing, and you had nearly 40, 50 foreign journalists saying, "What is the India minister saying?" Because the India is driving consensus. So, what is the India minister saying, and what is the possibility? So at about 1 a.m. in the morning, 12 midnight, 1 a.m., they thought that consensus has been arrived. Then there was crisis again. Then they said, oh, let's go back in. And eventually, we had 5 outcomes. So that perhaps encapsulates the shift that we are seeing, that India as being seen as an enabler and not as a stone pelter at the WTO anymore.
Absolutely, Anandji. I think the stamp of India is very solidly marked on this current WTO conference. And thank you for sharing the first-hand account with us and sharing those inside stories with us at Citti. Thank you so much, Anandji. It has been a pleasure to have you with us today. And thank you for taking out time and joining us.
Always a pleasure speaking with you, and my apologies if my answers have been a little long, but I thought it makes sense to set the context right and explain it to our viewers rather than giving you straight pointed answers on certain issues.
Absolutely. I think it's been very enriching to have your insights on all of the topics that we discussed today. Thank you, Anandji. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Namaste.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net.